Whether reason will prevail depends only partly upon us. We must hope and strive for the best. We must prepare for the worst.
You know, it's a bit really like the World War I on steroids. World War I with drones, World War I with electronic warfare, World War I with HIMARS, World War I with several inventions, satellites. So, but still, I mean, the trench warfare is an important part of it, and the fact that it is slow. 3.5 years passed, and World War I lasted for more than 4 years. But unfortunately, from the perspective of Ukraine, I think this war of attrition, this war which was seemingly a stalemate, is turning to a war of movement, not fast movement, but war of movement, and to the detriment of Ukraine. And Russia is winning, and this is not so slow anymore. Last year it used to be like one village per week, few hundred meters, a tree line. Now it's much more, and the Ukraine is in deep trouble because the attritional phase for Russia is seemingly ending, which means that it's not only attrition now which pushes the Ukrainians back, but also more and more deeper breakthroughs. Of course, these are not the Second World War type breakthroughs. You cannot go 30, 40, 50 kilometers behind the lines. But still, these are operational level breakthroughs by the Russians. And the reason is very simple. And the main issue is lack of manpower, not enough men. So if I make a comparison, and I apologize for having such comparisons because every war is different, but it's really a bit like the First World War, and Ukraine is unfortunately in the role of the Central Powers and not in the role of the Entente powers. So Ukraine is the weaker partner with less manpower, and even if it has outside help, we can send Ukraine weapons, we can send Ukraine money. And by the way, weapons are more important than money. Since you cannot kill anyone with a $100 bill or a €100 bill, you can kill with a 155 millimeter shell. Yeah, but that's what we are missing because we were not preparing for such a eventuality. So generally, I see it as Ukraine closing to the exhaustion level what the Central Powers had in the summer of 1918, when the fresh American troops changed the course of the war. So of course it's different. It's different. We have to understand that, but attrition can the phase of attrition can change to a phase of swift collapse quite swiftly. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Every time I try to analyze and predict the future in terms of Ukraine war, Ukrainians surprised me positively. So they were much more stubborn, much more tenacious, fighting much better off a bigger enemy. But now it looks really bad for Ukraine. And I think even a fast, not a full collapse, but local collapses are possible. And we will see a different war, I think, in the next 1 or 2 months if President Trump doesn't manage to stop it. So generally, I would say that attrition can turn very fast into a rout. You know, in September of 1918, Central Powers had troops almost everywhere on the territory of the Allied powers. Bulgaria, a smaller ally of the Central Powers, collapsed in the middle of September. Austria-Hungary collapsed at the end of October, and Germany surrendered in the middle of November. So it took 1.5 months, or less than 2 months, for the Central Powers, which just defeated Russia a year before, to collapse. So I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it's very important to understand that if we try to judge everything from what we saw a year ago or 2 years ago, and we try to predict the future based on that, we are on a very wrong track, since this Ukrainian army is not the Ukrainian army of 24 or 23, And unfortunately, this Russian army is not the Russian army of last year or 2 years ago. So it's not a question that China is supporting Russia. It's a fact, and I believed, actually I wrote even a fiction book before this war, that China and Russia will try to attack the West together. And so it was published actually a few months before the start of the full-scale Russian invasion, and it ends like Xi and Putin agrees of attacking the West together, China, Taiwan, and Russia, Ukraine. Of course, it was before the full scale, and China didn't attack Taiwan, or at least until now. But China definitely supported Russia, and for China, this is a war which is important, and this is a war in which they are winning. They are winning anyway. So if Russia is in a stalemate or losing the war, then Russia is more dependent on China. And if Russia wins big, well, maybe that's not so good for China, but then Europe and the US reputation is not really improving if Ukraine is lost. So for Russia, only for China, only the full collapse of Russia would be a bad scenario. So for us, my theory of this war, that this is a lose-lose situation for Russia, Ukraine, European Union, and even for the United States. Everybody is losing in this war, and that's why I think that President Trump is on a good track trying to stop it. But I'm not sure it's going to happen easily. If you look at the war in Ukraine, it is definitely had something to do with Russian language. It definitely has to do with how you treat people with a different language, different religion. Russia committed an aggression, it's not a question. But the Ukrainian state and some other countries are not so nice with Russian speakers and ethnic Russians. This is not the same, by the way. So Russian speaker can be an ethnic Ukrainian. There are much less ethnic Russians than Russian speakers in Ukraine. So these issues, just imagine Northern Ireland. They maybe for an American or for somebody from the UK, it's more understandable. Flag issue. Northern Ireland, the biggest, wave of violence. The troubles started with a flag. This starts with language law, education law. This is Ukraine, but also in Moldova. In Moldova, you have the Gagauz. You have Transnistria with Russian speakers in majority, Romanian speakers in minority. If you look at even Iran, if you look what was Israel's strategy in Iran, it was not only destroying or trying to slow down the nuclear program, it was also trying to help the Azeris, the Arabs. Iranians, ethnic Iranians are only half of Iran, a bit more than half of Iran. So these issues can be manipulated, these issues can be exploited from the outside. The US did it in Vietnam with minority communities. The same happened with the Kurds in Iraq. The US supported the Kurds in Iraq. So we always, look at, or at least on the mainstream press, we talk about democracy and human rights, but actually language and minority rights, which are not part of really what we talk about in mainstream media, these are the big things, because people do die or do rebel for language, for flag, for religion. They are much less likely to rebel because of corruption or other types of issues. So generally, I would think it's everywhere. It's everywhere in the region. Of course, Hungary is behaving differently, partly because of our national minority was not treated as we wish them to treat by Ukraine, but also it's an issue in Romania because there are many Romanians in Ukraine. These borders changed a lot in the last 100, or in some cases 200 years. And most people in the region, or not most, but several nations in the region have large minority communities on the other side of the border. Of course, Russians have the most minorities. They are a bit different than the Hungarian or Romanian minorities, but definitely they play a role. So generally, I would say that this is absolutely underestimated in the West. The Balkan was the best example. I mean, and still we talk about Putin wants only to recreate the Soviet Union. No, it's an issue of history. But if you look at his articles or what he says, it's about Russian history as he believes Russian history is. I don't believe him. I don't agree with him. Ukraine is a separate nation. I think they are proving it every day on the front lines. But still, there are Russian speakers and ethnic Russians in Ukraine, and you cannot deny that there was a problem with the approach of Ukraine. Not since 2022, not even 2014. It started in 2004 with the first revolution. And since the West is only approaching this from a liberal, progressive point of view, they don't understand the importance of language and religion also. It's also a religious conflict between the Moscow Patriarchate and the Kiev Patriarchate. So people are fighting for churches in Ukraine, and it's not covered in the West. So I could talk about hours about this. This is absolutely misunderstood. And what is one of the most important things that for Kiev, for Russia, Odessa for Russia is something deeply personal issue for Putin. Again, I don't agree with him. I think Kiev is the capital of Ukraine and the Ukrainian nation. But for him, the foundation of the Russian state is in Kiev. So we don't have to agree with him, but we have to understand his mindset that he is living in history. For an American, what happened 1,100 years ago, it's not that important. But for Putin, it's important. And that's why he's a threat to Ukraine, definitely a threat to Moldova, also to Kazakhstan, because a lot of Russians living there. But I don't think that he's a real threat to Warsaw. And Warsaw was part of the Russian Empire or Finland, but most of Europe were not. But even Warsaw and Finland is not a personal case for him. It's business. But Ukraine is personal. It's deeply personal.